just top tier. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything animated this well in my life, ever. Hey guys, ETJ Writes here. I just got back from seeing Across the Spider-Verse and I just had to get this out while the movie is still fresh in my mind. First things first, should you go see this movie? Absolutely yes. If you love comics, if you love Spider-Man, Marvel, even if you're a DC fan, if you like comics, you'll like it. If you're an animation fan, an art fan, this movie is not to be missed. It was visually stunning, and I'll get more into that a bit later. First of all, I did want to get into some things that didn't quite work for me. The first thing was the story itself. It was decent, it was fine, but it just didn't have a super strong drive. And spoilers, the movie ends on a cliffhanger, which actually is super, super smart, and I love that they did that, but it was not at all clear that that was where the story was going for a good 2/3 of the film. About 2/3 of the way through, I realized, hang on, wait, there's supposed to be like a big climactic moment happening right now, and it's not happening. It feels like the story is in the middle, and there's way more that needs to happen. And we hit the to be continued, and yes, that is the case. With something like Endgame and Infinity War, it was very, very obvious that the story would not be able to end within one film, and so it made more sense that we were leading up slowly into that, and then we ended, okay, to be continued, we'll pick it back up in the next film. And so any pacing issues or whatever, it was inherently understood that that would be picked up and resolved in the next film. Whereas with this movie, again, it was not narratively clear that that's where we were going until quite a bit of the way through the film, which is fine. The movie took some time to establish what was going on, but if you don't know going in that it's a to be continued, it does feel like it drags at certain points. Like the opening is great, but then we move from Gwen's opening to Miles' opening, and it just feels like not a lot of import is happening. It feels like we should have just started with Miles' story, or somehow managed to parallel Gwen and Miles' story at the same time. Just like it was too front loaded at the very beginning with action and then dead space and then slowly building back up into action again, which did not quite work if, again, you're expecting the story to be wrapped up in one film, which it isn't. But yeah, about 2/3 the way through, I was like, this feels like a comic book where I'm reading a series. This is a series. Something's happening that means the story is not going to end with this movie. And then as soon as I hit the to be continued, I was like, called it. But it shouldn't have taken us 2/3 of the movie to get there. It should have been very apparent from the jump. Now, of course, I didn't watch any trailers or spoilers or anything like that. So going in, I was totally blind. This is my real and honest reaction. I think the only trailer I saw for this movie was maybe about 2 years ago when they kind of released some of the early animation, and I knew immediately that I was going to watch it just from that early animation. I knew this was going to be a phenomenal film. I liked that they were changing the art style and that they weren't afraid to experiment. Speaking of art style, there's something else that I had a little bit of a bone to pick with, and given that the rest of the movie is so phenomenal, I don't know whether this is more something like, just kind of let it go, or it was so phenomenal, why did you miss this? And that is Miles' mom. There's a scene, I think it's a scene on the roof at the dad's party right after Gwen leaves and the mom ungrounds Miles so he can go and kind of hang out with her for a little bit before then he gets back to the real grounding. And she's talking to him and she's giving this beautifully delivered emotional speech, and the character's just dead. It's like, well, son, you need to do what you need to do. If I were to say something like, I love you very much and I'll always be there for you, versus I love you very much and I'll always be there for you, right? There's nothing happening with her face, and the rest of the movie is so expressive that it's very odd. I was just watching that scene being like, yeah, there's nothing going on. I'm having a hard time connecting with this character. And the rest of the time she's great, but in that one scene it was very wooden, and I don't know why they didn't just make her face move less stiffly. The only other nitpick I had about this movie is that it felt like it was too long. It's about 2 hours long, and it just drags in some places. When I went to go see Guardians of the Galaxy a while back, that movie just flew by at an incredible pace and I was never bored at any point. Whereas in this film, there were some points where I was like, okay, can we get to the action now? Because again, like I said, the story itself, while fine, just didn't have the same freshness and tension, I would say, that the original had. I still remember when that Prowler showed up on screen with that music in the original.
Kill that guy.
So I'll put my definitive list of rankings right here for all the Spider-Man movies, and you'll notice that I have not ranked Across the Spider-Verse top. Into the Spider-Verse is still my top because the story and everything else is just so solid. And then I like how the other ones made me feel, and I think they did a really great job building up to the story of the other ones. There's some great twists. Not to say that Across the Spider-Verse is not phenomenal, because it is. It just, if the story had been stronger, it would have ranked a lot higher. All right, all the negatives out of the way, let's talk about the positives, because there are so many. Despite the story not being super fantastic phenomenal, it was still very solid. The villain was great. I wish we had seen just a little bit more of him, and I'm sure we will see more of him in the next film, but I really liked his powers. I like how they kept escalating him. I like how it really gave the animators something to work with as far as what he could do, and the fact that this was a very easy way to pull us into the multiverse. That's another point in its favor. The multiverse thing was so much fun. I loved seeing all the different Spider-Men. I was totally laughing out loud at some of the spots, especially the Scarlet Spider, Ben Reilly. There's a scene with him. It's hysterical, and I laughed so hard. I think I was the only one, because I don't think anybody else had my extensive knowledge of Spider-Man at the theater. I think they just thought, oh, it's another fun Spider-Man movie, but the references were golden. When Jessica Drew showed up as Spider-Woman, chef's kiss. I loved her hair. It was so good. I mean, the original Jessica Drew is great too, but I mean, just the big afro, it fit her character so well, and also really provided symmetry with the fact that in this story she's pregnant, which is another storyline they've borrowed from the comics, which is really fun. I really like that they drew a lot of inspiration from the comics. So you look at stuff and you think, hey, that doesn't seem like it came from the comics. Oh, but it did, because the comics are far weirder than you could imagine. I also thought it was really neat that they included the MCU by using Donald Glover's Prowler. He has a very small bit in, I believe, Homecoming movie in the MCU Spider-Man films, and he showed up again here, which was really fun. It was really fun to see live action with the animation, and it's just a small bit, so it works really well. I think if they had done more than that, it would have felt very off. There are a couple other scenes where it kind of shows images, like you're looking through a mirror and you see the Raimi Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, but they're kind of, again, you're looking through something else at them. They're not actually in the scene interacting with the characters, which Donald Glover's Prowler is. I like that we got to see some old friends from the first film, and there were quite a bit of new characters that showed up that were extremely fun as well. And when I say new, of course, I mean new from the first film, because they were characters that were, of course, from the comics, which was really fun to see. And it was just a great visual delight for anyone who loves Spider-Man. Of course, they put the meme in there. You know the meme I'm talking about. And it was just a chef's kiss moment again. Like, it was so funny. I laughed so hard. There were a bunch of other small little gags throughout the film. Like, there's one at the background where he stops for just a moment. In the background, you see it says generic soda. And it was so funny. It was just one small little thing, but that they took the time to animate that and put that in. Definitely laughed. I loved that every world they went to had a different art style, and this was actually really one of the highlights, the strengths of the film. When it first started, I wasn't sure quite who the story was going to center on. Was it going to be Gwen, or was it going to be Miles? But it's very clear that even though there's a narrative storyline that's pushing everything forward, the actual underlying theme is fear and struggling to be accepted, because Miles is afraid to tell his father and his mother who he really is, because he could get rejected, and he just doesn't know how he's gonna feel. But then you've got Gwen, who winds up telling her father who she is, and he immediately rejects her, and then she winds up rejecting him in return, and she has to live with that hole in her heart and figure out how to navigate the rest of the universe, her universe, and the multiverse with that emotional wound that she's carrying. So it's a really great underlying story, and it would have been amazing if they had a stronger narrative story to kind of parallel that. And it does a little bit, it's just not as compelling as I would have hoped for. But what is really compelling is the use of the art. I mean, there is no way this movie could have been live action. No way. There's just so many things they do here with the animation that's phenomenal, show-stopping, incredible, just simply fantastic. The way they show angles and freezing things, moments just slowly going down, things that, of course, I know they're using some computer-generated animation, of course, but things that you can draw with a pencil, and somehow it looks way more incredible than anything you could ever animate to look realistic. Speaking of realism, they don't even try sometimes. And what I mean by that is they make deliberate choices to make things abstract. And normally I'm not a huge fan of abstract art, but here it worked so well because they were using color and shapes to express feelings and emotions and thoughts. Like when Gwen is talking to her father at the beginning and how she's feeling, the color palette is just so different, and the art style is just like this blocky, like 80s style watercolor where everything's just kind of blocky and not impressionistic, but not fully formed. There's no clean lines to anything. And there's a part when she's talking to her dad where like behind him it's like white but then blue, and there's like these bubbles to show, not bubbles, but like a bubbly texture, if that makes sense, where it shows that she's talking to him but she's not getting through because the color in the background is displaying his mood. It's fantastic. And then narratively that is mirrored when she goes back and she talks to him at the end of the film, and they've got these dark colors and all that kind of stuff, and then he talks to her, and then behind him the color palette lightens, everything opens up, it brightens, the shapes change to show that he's had a change of mind. It's so good, like amazing. And then it cuts over to Gwen, same exact color palette to show that they're now on the same page. It's so good. Like just the way they decided to use art in this film is just, they're doing things in animation with this film that I haven't seen done in animation in years. And I know they're doing some amazing things in the anime department, but I think a lot of the anime has started to turn more toward realistic, although they are doing some fantastic things with anime. I'll just pop a clip right here of the opening to Vinland Saga, which I may have to go and watch that, because if there's two things I love, it's anime and Vikings. But that's great and all. It's still, to me, almost though, on the one hand, while it looks like it's mimicking very standard classic anime tropes, on the other hand, it is also kind of, to me, reminiscent of the Vikings TV show of that opening, which it's hard not to be influenced by because the Vikings TV show was everywhere for a long time, and that's also a great, phenomenal show. I cried a lot during it, and it was so good. I mean, I know there's some historical inaccuracies, but a lot of it's actually really good as well. So if you like Vikings, check that out. But all of that to say that that still doesn't touch the use of animation in this film. I need to see more animation done like this, where I'm sure it took a lot of time and it's probably took a lot of money, and I do want people to be paid fairly. But hey, I've been waiting for this movie since 2018, and if people have to take their time to put out good art, I'm here for it, because it was just the most amazing thing I can ever think of. Like, the first movie had amazing art. This one, the art was even better, which, even though the story is not as strong as the first movie, the artwork more than makes up for it. Now, I'm not saying you should have a bad story and good animation, but what I am saying is that the solid animation and the way the animators used the colors and the drawings to express the story, just top tier. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything animated this well in my life, ever. And I have watched a lot of animation. Just tons of it. This was the best thing, the best animation I have ever seen. And I'm sure if you go watch it, it'll be the best thing you've ever seen. And I need this to be the gold standard that every subsequent animation holds themselves to. All in all, this was definitely an amazing film. I definitely give it 4, maybe 4.5 stars. Not quite 5 because the story wasn't as compelling as I wanted it to be. But as far as everything else, the voice acting, the music choices were very good. The animation was out of this world, show-stopping. And it was very enjoyable 2 hours. I would definitely recommend anyone to see this film. I'll talk to you all again soon. Until next time, happy story enjoying.